There are two themes, I think, running through the readings appointed for today. Firstly, one of gratitude and thankfulness, acknowledging people doing good things. And secondly, God using what appeared to be difficult situations with little hope for good. In our Old Testament reading from 2 Kings, we see a person who has status. Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, who was rather put out with what he was expected to do, particularly as it was a young girl suggesting it. Sadly, this is a reaction and situation we see, and it is contrary to the beliefs and standards we all seek to follow and to live by. As individuals, though, we can relate to this, particularly when people suggest something we don't agree with, or sadly we think is beneath our position or status. And yet, when we think about and reflect on it, we know deep down in our more serious moments we can learn from it, and indeed benefit from it in many instances, and allow others to do the same, which is what eventually happened to Naaman. The story of Elisha's healing of Naaman is set in the context of tension, sometimes outright war, between Naaman's country, Aram, and Israel. Like most stories, there are several issues. The hostility between the two countries, the leprosy itself, and Naaman's pride, which prevents him accepting the healing ritual. God's grace, however, functions in the story to overcome all their problems. It also opens up the possibility that foreigners not born Israelites might opt to affiliate themselves to Israel's God, who is recognized at the end of the passage as the only true God. In our reading from the epistle, we see Paul at this last stage of his life having to confront a sense of failure at several levels. He must realize by now that his long-term plan to share the gospel in parts of Europe will not be realized. And alongside this, his work in Asia Minor, Turkey, is in danger of coming to nothing through false teaching and personal betrayal. His own situation must have seen a stark contrast to the power of God that was promised. But central to Paul's gospel is the pattern of Jesus' death and resurrection. For those looking for the Messiah to come, Jesus' death must have seemed God-forsaken and his resurrection simply inexplicable. And if this pattern of public failure and hidden victory marked Jesus' life, surely it will mark the life of his followers. Paul anticipated neither easy triumph or terminal failure, and neither should we, realizing instead that suffering and self-forgetting now will ultimately lead to fullness of life and patient endurance, reflecting God's own nature, which will be rewarded as we reign with him. There are no shortcuts in this. We cannot play games with our Maker, but having said that, when the going gets tough, what matters most is not that we have grasped him, but he has grasped us, and that he is faithful. To continue strongly in this pattern of grace, we need to rely not on our words, but on his word, no matter what our circumstances. Our gospel reading is a story full of vivid, naturalistic detail. The border between Samaria and Galilee would have been a natural route to Jerusalem, avoiding Samaria itself. Those suffering infectious skin diseases, not necessarily leprosy as we understand it, had to live on the outskirts of the village and were used to keeping their distance. As Jesus rested in the village, he would easily have been found, and the leper's obedience in going to the priest showed real faith. The reason for going was for the priest to certify that they had been healed. And the priest would, among other things, anoint the healed person with oil to signal God's blessing and gladness. Faith and thanksgiving belong together, but only the Samaritan demonstrates both faith and thanks. But as a characteristic of Luke's Gospel, it is the outsider who receives the full blessing. Faith saves him, but the word means much more than mere physical healing. It makes clear the nature of God's favour. It is not a right granted by virtue of who you are or where you are born, but it is a gift freely given. Faith is incomplete without gratitude. When we give thanks, we put ourselves in a place of grace by recognizing that all we have is God's gift. It is a gift available to all, and we should be constantly thanking God for it and sharing it with others. In recent years, we have seen many instances of people gifting their support to others in many different ways and sharing their gifts in so many different ways. In a lot of cases, differences have been put aside as people come together to support one another in cases of need. Strangers have become friends as they work together on a project to help others. As many struggle on a daily basis to provide food for their families, and others are fearful to go out alone for fear of how they will be viewed, it is important we all play our part in enabling everyone to live in harmony with each other, celebrating and accepting different ways of living, knowing we are loved and supported by a God who loves us unconditionally as we strive to serve him day by day. As the words of our closing hymn says, "No condemnation now I dread, Jesus and all in him is mine, alive in him my living head, and clothed in righteousness divine, bold I approach the eternal throne, and claim the crown through Christ my own." Amen.